Long before the age of satellites and encrypted messages, espionage was an art form, one that relied on wit, intuition, and the subtle mastery of human nature. Picture this: a messenger casually handing over a scroll, its contents seemingly ordinary, but hidden within the ink lies a coded message that could alter the fate of an empire. Or consider a merchant traveling between cities, his trade routes doubling as a web of secrets, whispered only to those who knew how to listen. This was the world of ancient spies, where intelligence wasn't just about gathering information, it was about survival, power, and the delicate dance of deception. What if I told you that some of history's most pivotal moments, wars won, dynasties toppled, even civilizations saved, hinged on the actions of these shadowy figures? They operated without the flashy tools we associate with modern spies, yet their methods were so ingenious, so perfectly tailored to their time, that they rival even today's high-tech surveillance. From the Silk Roads of Asia to the marble halls of Rome, these early agents mastered the art of blending in, of turning everyday objects into vessels of secrets, and of building networks so trusted that their loyalty could shift the balance of power. This is the untold story of espionage roots, a tale not of gadgets but of human cunning. How did a simple knotted rope become a lifeline of intelligence for the Inca? Why did ancient Egyptian pharaohs rely on scribes who could write in code? And what can these age-old techniques teach us about the nature of secrecy itself? As we peel back the layers of history, you'll discover that the spies of the past were more than just informants. They were architects of destiny, shaping the world in ways we're only beginning to understand. So settle in, because this journey into the shadows of antiquity will change how you see the hidden threads that weave through history, and perhaps even the world around you today. Ancient espionage wasn't about hidden cameras or encrypted files. It was a game of trust, disguise, and sheer audacity. Imagine a scribe in the courts of ancient Egypt, his reed pen scratching out official records while secretly encoding messages in the spacing between hieroglyphs. Or picture a Greek merchant, his cargo of olive oil and pottery hiding scrolls filled with troop movements passed along to rival city-states. These spies didn't need gadgets, they wielded something far more powerful: the ability to vanish into plain sight. What set them apart was their deep understanding of human nature. A priest in Mesopotamia might overhear confessions, not just to absolve sins but to gather whispers of rebellion. A diplomat servant, seemingly invisible to the elite, could catch careless words spoken over wine. Their greatest weapon wasn't stealth, it was being unremarkable. And that's what made them dangerous. While kings and generals focused on swords and sieges, these unseen players shaped history through stolen glances, forged letters, and well-timed rumors. Their missions were as varied as the cultures they served. In China, Sun Tzu's Art of War praised spies who could divine the enemy's plans years before battle. Roman emperors employed networks of informers to sniff out plots in the Senate. Even the Inca, with their intricate not-recorded quipu system, used coded strings to relay secrets across mountain passes. But despite their differences, all shared one trait: they knew information was power long before the digital age. The next time you hear about cyber espionage, remember, the roots of secrecy run far deeper than the internet. They stretch back to these masters of deception who proved that sometimes the quietest voices change the world. The dusty clay tablets of Mesopotamia and the sun-baked scrolls of Egypt hold the earliest whispers of espionage, proof that spying is as old as civilization itself. In the courts of pharaohs and kings, trust was a luxury and information was the currency of survival. Take the Amarna letters, for example. These ancient diplomatic messages, etched in cuneiform, reveal how Pharaoh Akhenaten's network of informants kept watch over vassal states and rival powers. A seemingly routine report about grain shipments might conceal warnings of unrest, or a merchant's gossip about troop movements could decide the fate of a kingdom. But Egypt wasn't alone in this shadow game. Across the sands in Mesopotamia, the Hittites and Assyrians turned espionage into a science of war. Scouts disguised as traders would slip behind enemy lines, mapping fortifications and counting soldiers. One Assyrian tablet boasts of spies who infiltrated a rival camp by posing as deserters, only to return with details so precise they dictated the entire battle strategy. These weren't just random acts of deception, they were calculated moves in a high-stakes dance of power. What's striking about these early spies is how little their tools resembled modern gadgets. Instead of bugs and wiretaps, they used something far more subtle, the art of blending in. A scribe's reed pen could encode secrets in the spacing of hieroglyphs. A messenger's humble satchel might hide a clay tablet with invisible ink. Even the humble quipu knotted cords used by the Inca could relay complex messages across vast distances when handled by trained hands. Yet the real genius of these ancient operatives lay in their understanding of human weakness. They knew that a drunk noble might boast of his king's plans, or that a disgruntled servant could be bribed for secrets. The oldest spy manual in existence, Sun Tzu's Art of War, didn't just endorse espionage, it celebrated 5 distinct types of agents, from expendable pawns to deep-cover sleepers. This wasn't just tactics, it was psychology dressed in shadows. So the next time you hear about cyber leaks or satellite surveillance, remember the blueprint was written millennia ago. Those ancient spies may have lacked technology, but their legacy proves one timeless truth. Information has always been the ultimate weapon, and the best way to wield it. Staying invisible. If you think modern spy agencies invented the rulebook for intelligence operations, think again. Sun Tzu's The Art of War, written over 2,000 years ago, laid out a Spycraft playbook so sophisticated it could rival today's field manuals. The ancient Chinese didn't just use spies, they perfected them, categorizing agents into 5 distinct roles, each with a purpose as precise as a surgeon's scalpel. Local spies weren't just informants, they were the eyes and ears embedded in enemy territory, farmers or merchants who knew every back alley and could detect shifts in morale with a single glance. Then came the double agents, the ultimate chess players, feeding false information to the opposition while secretly working for the other side. But the real brilliance lay in how Sun Tzu understood human psychology. Expendable spies, for example, weren't sent on suicide missions out of cruelty. Their deaths were calculated sacrifice to spread deliberate misinformation, tricking enemies into fatal miscalculations. Meanwhile, deep cover agents spent years, even decades, building false identities to gain trust in enemy courts, their patience as steady as the Yangtze River. And the surviving spies, these were the elite, the ones who gathered intelligence and returned alive, their reports shaping entire campaigns. What's astonishing is how little this system relied on brute force. Instead, it thrived on subtlety, a well-placed rumor here, a forged letter there. During the Warring States period, a single surviving spy's report about a rival kingdom's grain shortages could prompt an invasion or force a surrender without a single sword drawn. This wasn't just warfare, it was a high-stakes performance where information was the ultimate weapon. Yet Sun Tzu's most enduring lesson wasn't about tactics, it was about foresight. He warned that neglecting spies would doom rulers to ignorance and ruin, a reminder that intelligence wasn't a luxury but the backbone of survival. And when you look at history's turning points, from the fall of dynasties to the rise of empires, it's clear the shadows held as much power as the throne. The next time you hear about a modern intelligence coup, remember the blueprint was inked in bamboo long before the first satellite ever orbited the Earth. History's shadows hide a truth rarely told. Some of the most effective spies weren't kings or generals but women, wielding influence from the margins. Take Delilah, whose name still echoes as a master of deception. While the biblical tale paints her as a seductress, look closer. Her real weapon wasn't beauty but perception. By leaning into the stereotype of the powerless woman, she dismantled a warrior. This wasn't weakness, it was strategy. Ancient societies often dismissed women as mere ornaments, but that very oversight became their advantage. In the courts of ancient Greece, heterae high-status courtesans moved through symposiums like ghosts, their laughter masking sharp ears. While men debated war and politics, these women sipped wine and collected secrets. Aspasia, companion to Pericles, wasn't just a philosopher. Whispers suggest she shaped Athenian policy through networks of informants. Even Sparta, famed for its warrior culture, relied on women to monitor the helots, their enslaved population. A Spartan wife's gossip over wool spinning could reveal plots before they reached the battlefield. But perhaps the most striking example comes from China's Warring States period. Mozi, the philosopher, wrote of female spies who infiltrated rival states as concubines or servants, their loyalty so convincingly feigned that they rose to become trusted advisors only to sabotage from within. These women didn't need daggers. A well-timed sigh or a tearful confession could turn a ruler against his own generals. What made them so effective? Society's blind spot. When women were seen as apolitical or emotionally driven, their access to private chambers, intimate conversations, and even royal bedrooms went unchallenged. A queen's maid could witness sealed treaties. A merchant's wife might overhear trade routes critical to military supply lines. Their power lay in being overlooked, a lesson modern intelligence agencies still study. So why does history forget them? Scrolls and chronicles written by men often reduce their roles to scandal or seduction. But peel back the layers and you'll find something far more subversive, a world where the quietest voices held the loudest secrets. These women didn't just participate in espionage, they redefined it, proving that the best spies aren't always the ones holding the knife, but the ones no one thinks to watch. The Spartans didn't just rely on brute strength, they mastered the art of secrecy with a tool so simple yet so brilliant. It still fascinates cryptographers today, the Sightail. Picture a wooden rod no thicker than a staff, handed only to trusted messengers. To send a coded message, a strip of leather or parchment would be wound tightly around it, and the words written in a straight line down its length. Unwound, the strip appeared to hold nothing but gibberish until it was wrapped around an identical rod in the recipient's hands, magically realigning the letters into legible orders. This wasn't just a cipher, it was a physical key, a tangible example of how ancient minds turned everyday objects into instruments of subterfuge. But the Sightail was just the beginning. Across the Mediterranean, Roman generals and Egyptian pharaohs took secrecy a step further with invisible inks, concocted from substances as ordinary as milk, vinegar, or even onion juice. A seemingly blank parchment could hold battle plans or treasonous plots, revealed only when heated over a flame or brushed with a chemical reagent. The genius lay in the simplicity. Who would suspect a love letter or a grocery list to conceal the movements of an army? Perhaps the most audacious cryptographic feat, though, came from ancient India. The Courtier's Shastra, a manual on statecraft written around the 4th century BCE, detailed a method where spies would shave a messenger's head, tattoo the message onto their scalp, and let the hair regrow before sending them on their way. By the time the courier reached their destination, the only key needed was a razor. What united these methods wasn't complexity but creativity. Without computers or algorithms, ancient cryptographers exploited the one weakness their enemies rarely guarded against: the limits of imagination. A knotted rope, a bowl of lemon juice, or even a haircut could carry world-shaking secrets. And while today's encryption relies on firewalls and quantum computing, the principle remains the same: the best codes aren't just unbreakable, they're invisible. In the sprawling empires of Antiquity, where borders stretched for thousands of miles and wars hinged on timely information, spies perfected an art we still recognize today: the silent relay of secrets. Persia's royal road wasn't just a marvel of engineering. It was the ancient world's information superhighway. Couriers mounted on swift horses raced between stations, each fresh rider taking over like a baton in a relay, ensuring messages could travel over 1,600 miles in less than a week. These weren't mere letters, they were lifelines. A single scroll tucked into a rider's sash might warn of an invading army or reveal a traitor's plot, its urgency marked by the seal of the king's trusted angaros, the Persian royal messengers who answered to no one but the throne. But speed wasn't enough, security was everything. To protect their cargo, these couriers employed tricks that would feel familiar to modern spies. Some messages were written in cipher, while others were memorized entirely, leaving no physical trace. Herodotus marveled at how Persian messengers could recite entire proclamations verbatim, their minds becoming the ultimate encrypted storage, and if a rider was ambushed, the message often died with him, a grim but effective failsafe. Meanwhile, in the bustling streets of Rome and Athens, spies took a different approach. Instead of racing couriers, they relied on the power of invisibility. Dead drops, hidden compartments in temple walls, hollowed-out olive trees, or even beneath the stones of public baths became the ancient equivalent of a secure server. A merchant might casually leave a pottery shard near a marketplace fountain, its seemingly random scratches actually a coded report on troop movements. Or a slave, dismissed as insignificant, could slip a wax tablet between the bricks of a bathhouse, where another agent would retrieve it hours later. The brilliance of these systems lay in their simplicity. No technology, no elaborate gadgets, just human ingenuity and an understanding of how people move through space. A drop spot might be chosen precisely because it was unremarkable: a cracked amphora in a tavern cellar, or a niche in a cemetery wall where mourners left offerings. The best locations were those everyone saw but no one noticed, and here's what's astonishing: these methods weren't just effective, they were resilient. When Rome's enemies intercepted a messenger, they often found nothing because the real message had already been passed through a network of seemingly unrelated contacts. A baker's daily bread delivery might hide a coded grain tally revealing enemy supplies. An actor's monologue in a crowded theater could contain veiled instructions, audible to all but understood by few. This is why modern intelligence agencies still study these ancient systems. Dead drops are used today from Berlin to Beijing, and couriers remain a backbone of secure communication in the digital age. Because while the tools have changed, microfilms swapped for encrypted USB drives, horse relays for satellite links, the principles endure: speed, secrecy, and the timeless truth that the best way to hide something is often in plain sight. The next time you pass a loose cobblestone or a park bench with a hidden compartment, remember, you're walking in the footsteps of spies who turned the ordinary into the extraordinary. The Roman Empire didn't just conquer with legions, it ruled with whispers. Behind the marble facades of power, a shadow army moved unseen. The Fremontarii, Rome's original spies disguised as humble grain merchants. These agents traveled the empire's vast roads, their carts loaded with wheat and barley, but their real cargo was secrets. To the average citizen, they were just traders haggling over prices. In reality, they were the eyes and ears of the emperor, listening for murmurs of rebellion in taverns, counting troop movements near border forts, even intercepting letters between disgruntled senators. Their genius lay in their cover. Everyone needed grain, so no one questioned their presence. But the Fremontarii were just the beginning. By the time of Emperor Augustus, Rome's spycraft had evolved into something far more sophisticated. Enter the speculators, an elite corps of covert operatives handpicked for their discretion and loyalty. Unlike the Fremontarii, who blended into crowds, these men were shadows in the literal sense, trained in sabotage, assassination, and deep cover infiltration. Historical accounts hint at their missions, slipping into Germanic tribes to map their settlements, poisoning rebellious governors under the guise of illness, or planting forged documents to turn allies against each other. One speculator might pose as a slave in a rival's household for years, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. What's fascinating is how Rome institutionalized espionage. While earlier empires relied on ad hoc networks, the Romans made intelligence a pillar of statecraft. The Fremontarii weren't just spies, they were bureaucrats, their reports filed alongside tax records in the imperial archives. Emperors like Hadrian used them to weed out corruption in distant provinces, proving that information wasn't just for war, it was the glue holding the empire together. Yet this system had a dark side. Over time, the Fremontarii grew feared as much as they were respected. Citizens whispered of midnight arrests sparked by a neighbor's anonymous tip, or merchants vanishing after complaining about taxes. The very tools that stabilized the empire's secrecy, surveillance, and suspicion also fueled paranoia. By the 3rd century, their reputation had soured so thoroughly that Emperor Diocletian disbanded them, replacing them with the agents in rebus, a new cadre of courier spies. Rome's legacy in espionage isn't just about tactics, it's about scale. From the Fremontarii's grassroots intelligence to the speculators' surgical strikes, they proved that an empire couldn't survive by sword alone. It needed a network of silent watchers, turning whispers into weapons long before the term intelligence agency existed. And if that sounds familiar, it should. The echoes of Rome's shadow war resonate in every modern security service, a reminder that power has always belonged to those who master the art of seeing without being seen. Ancient spies understood a truth that still shapes modern warfare. Sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't a sword, but a lie. Take the Peloponnesian War, where Athenian commanders didn't just outfight Sparta, they outthought them. One general, Demosthenes, ordered his men to light extra campfires on a distant hillside, tricking Spartan scouts into believing his forces were twice their actual size. The ruse worked perfectly. Sparta diverted precious troops to defend against a phantom army, weakening their real front line. This wasn't just clever tactics, it was psychological warfare, proving that deception could be as decisive as any battle. But the Greeks weren't alone in this art. Half a world away, the Shastra, an ancient Indian treatise on statecraft, devoted entire chapters to what it called the sowing of dissension. Kings employed agents to spread carefully crafted rumors in rival courts, whispers of betrayal between generals, false reports of famine in neighboring lands, even staged defections designed to spark paranoia. One passage describes how a spy might pretend to defect, carrying forged letters, accidentally dropped where enemy officials would find them. The goal wasn't just misinformation, it was chaos, turning allies against each other long before armies ever clashed. The brilliance of these ancient tactics lay in their subtlety. Roman generals, for instance, would leak fake battle plans to captured soldiers, then deliberately let them escape. When the prisoners bravely reported back to their commanders, they unknowingly led them into ambushes. Even the Byzantines elevated disinformation to an art form. Emperor Justinian's spies circulated exaggerated tales of their own military defeats, luring overconfident enemies into traps where their forces could be surrounded. What's striking is how little these methods relied on technology. A dropped scroll, a drunken soldier's boast, or a merchant's secret overheard in a tavern, these were the tools that toppled empires. And while today's disinformation campaigns play out on social media, the principles remain unchanged. Exploit trust, amplify doubt, and let the enemy's imagination do the rest. Perhaps the most chilling example comes from China's Three Kingdoms period. A strategist named Zhu Liang once ordered 500 dummy soldiers' straw-stuffed uniforms on wooden poles placed along a mountain pass. When enemy scouts reported the troops standing eerily still, their commander assumed it was an ambush and retreated, surrendering vital territory without a fight. The lesson: in the hands of a master, even emptiness can become a weapon. This is why disinformation endures as espionage's oldest trick. It costs nothing to spread, leaves no fingerprints, and can unravel an adversary from within. Modern intelligence agencies might have bots and deepfakes, but their playbook was written millennia ago by spies who knew one timeless truth: the right lie told at the right time can be more devastating than any army. Temples and monasteries, places of quiet devotion, were far more than spiritual sanctuaries in the ancient world. They doubled as bustling intelligence hubs, where whispers of rebellion, royal scandals, and military plans flowed as freely as prayer. In Egypt, priests weren't just intermediaries to the gods, they were the pharaoh's most trusted eyes and ears. Imagine a high priest conducting a sacred ritual, his chants masking coded messages about border unrest, or a temple scribe recording offerings while secretly noting which nobles donated generously and which withheld, signaling disloyalty. The gods' houses became perfect cover. Who would dare search a holy place for spies? But Egypt was just the beginning. In medieval Europe, monasteries became the ancient equivalent of secure data centers. Monks painstakingly copied manuscripts, but some did more than preserve knowledge, they altered it. A scribe might mistakenly tweak a historical chronicle to favor a patron king, or smuggle forbidden texts between the lines of scripture. The Venerable Bede, an English monk, famously gathered intelligence from travelers to compile histories that shaped political narratives. And let's not forget the abbots who hosted traveling nobles, their hospitality a veil for extracting secrets over shared wine. The connection between faith and espionage ran deepest in Byzantium. There, the patriarch's clergy acted as a shadow diplomatic corps, using religious envoys to scout enemy lands. A bishop's pilgrimage to Jerusalem might conveniently pass through strategic forts, his pious retinue noting troop deployments. Even the Hagia Sophia's echoing halls hid agents posing as deacons, their hymns drowned out by the rustle of stolen documents. What made religious institutions so effective for spying? Two things: access and trust. Temples were neutral ground where rivals might lower their guards during festivals or confession. And in an age where faith dictated life, few questioned the motives of those who served the divine. A monk's robe or priestly vestments became the ultimate disguise, cloaking agendas in reverence. Yet this system wasn't without irony. The very men who preached morality also mastered deception, proving that in the ancient world, faith and power were threads of the same tapestry. And perhaps that's the most enduring lesson when belief and politics intertwine. Even the holiest places can harbor the quietest revolutions. Merchants with their caravans of silks and spices were the unsung spies of antiquity, their trade routes doubling as the internet of the ancient world. Take the Silk Road, that legendary artery of commerce stretching from China to Rome, where every bale of silk could hide a coded message, every barrel of wine might conceal a map of border forts. These traders didn't just move goods, they trafficked in secrets, their very mundanity their greatest asset. Who would suspect a dusty merchant haggling over porcelain prices of memorizing the layout of a Persian garrison, or a spice seller's casual gossip about bandit activity along the Taklamakan Desert to be a coded warning of troop movements? The brilliance of this system lay in its reciprocity. Kings and emperors didn't just tolerate these merchant spies, they actively cultivated them. Chinese dynasties like the Han and Tang maintained tribute trade networks where official caravans carried diplomats with one hand and intelligence operatives with the other. A merchant granted access to the Mongol court might note the tension between khans, intelligence as valuable as any gemstone. Even the Venetian Marco Polo, long celebrated as an explorer, likely served as eyes and ears for European powers, his travelogues peppered with strategic details about Kublai Khan's administration. But the real masters of this game were the Sogdians, the ancient world's merchant elite. Based in what's now Uzbekistan, they built a network so vast it became the backbone of Eurasian espionage. A Sogdian trader in Chang'an could pass a message through a chain of colleagues Samarkand to Baghdad, Baghdad to Constantinople, with each handoff disguised as routine business. Their language, unintelligible to most outsiders, became the perfect cipher. A bill of sale for 5 bolts of blue silk might secretly denote the strength of a Byzantine legion. What's fascinating is how these networks mirrored modern intelligence protocols. Dead drops took the form of consignments left at caravanserais. Only the right merchant knew which crate held a hidden compartment. Brush contacts occurred in market stalls, where a discussion of saffron prices could mask the exchange of scrolls. And like today's asset handlers, rulers often protected their merchant spies with diplomatic immunity, valuing their intelligence too highly to risk exposure. Yet the system wasn't foolproof. The Mughal Emperor Akbar once intercepted a caravan from Iran, discovering hollowed-out walking staffs stuffed with military dispatches. The Abbasid Caliphate employed market inspectors, who were really counterintelligence agents, trained to spot the slight hesitation of a merchant overpaying for inferior goods, a telltale sign of a rushed message exchange. This interplay of commerce and espionage reveals a timeless truth. Information has always followed trade routes. From the frankincense trails of Arabia to the amber roads of the Baltics, the flow of secrets moved alongside spices and jewels. So the next time you hear about modern economic espionage, remember the game hasn't changed. Only the currency has, from silk bolts to silicon chips. In the shadows of ancient espionage, where information was power, some operatives wielded a far deadlier tool, the silent knife or the untraceable poison. While many spies gathered secrets, others existed solely to eliminate threats. Their missions cloaked in darkness long before the term wet work entered the modern lexicon. Consider the Hashishans, an 11th century Persian sect whose very name still evokes whispered terror. Operating from mountain fortresses, these master assassins didn't just kill, they staged psychological spectacles. A target might wake to find a dagger plunged into his pillow, or a loaf of bread laced with poison left on his table. The message was clear: no one was beyond their reach. Their most infamous leader, Hassan I Sabbah, understood that fear could paralyze an empire faster than any army. When the Seljuk vizier Nizam al-Mulk was stabbed in broad daylight by a Hashashin disguised as a Sufi mystic, it wasn't just a murder, it was a performance designed to shake the foundations of power. Rome, too, had its shadow warriors, though their methods were less theatrical but equally ruthless. The speculators, elite agents of the empire, specialized in what we'd now call targeted eliminations. Historical fragments suggest they poisoned rebellious governors with tainted wine or arranged accidental falls for senators who threatened the emperor's agenda. One account describes a Germanic chieftain dying after accepting a gift of honeyed figs, a treat laced with hemlock. The brilliance of these acts lay in their ambiguity. Without witnesses or clear evidence, victims' deaths could be dismissed as natural, leaving no trail back to Rome. But assassination wasn't the only tool of disruption. Sabotage, subtle, devastating, and deniable, could cripple enemies without a single life taken. Chinese strategists during the Warring States period wrote of burning enemy grain stores under cover of storms, ensuring famine did the work of an army. Byzantine engineers, disguised as laborers, would weaken bridge supports before battles, causing them to collapse under the weight of charging cavalry. Even animals became unwitting agents. The Carthaginians allegedly tied burning bundles to wild foxes, sending them stampeding through enemy camps to ignite chaos. What united these acts wasn't just their violence, but their precision. Unlike modern warfare's collateral damage, ancient covert ops prized surgical strikes. A single death or a sabotaged mill could alter the course of a war, proving that sometimes the smallest intervention held the greatest power. And that's the chilling legacy of these operatives. They didn't just change history from the shadows. They rewrote the rules of engagement, teaching us that the deadliest wars are often fought one whisper, one drop of poison, one carefully placed knife at a time. Long before drones and satellites, spies relied on creatures with far more natural instincts, animals trained to be silent partners in the shadow game of intelligence. Among the most famous were homing pigeons, nature's original encrypted messengers. These birds weren't just carriers, they were living, breathing algorithms, navigating hundreds of miles with uncanny precision to deliver tiny scrolls tied to their legs. During sieges, when city walls blocked human couriers, pigeons became lifelines. The ancient Romans used them to coordinate military campaigns, while Genghis Khan's empire built a vast network of pigeon lofts across Asia, turning the skies into an information highway. Even in World War I, these feathered agents outsmarted enemy snipers and telegraph interceptors, proving that sometimes evolution's design outpaces human invention. But pigeons weren't the only animals drafted into espionage. Dogs, with their acute senses, patrolled palace halls and border forts as living alarms. The Babylonians stationed mastiffs at night to detect infiltrators, their growls serving as an ancient motion sensor. In Persia, royal kennels bred hounds so fiercely loyal they'd ignore food from anyone but their handlers, a built-in counterintelligence feature against poisoning. And let's not forget the legendary Molossian dogs of Epirus, whose mere presence deterred spies, much like modern guard dogs at military installations today. Perhaps the most surprising agents, though, swam beneath the waves. Ancient Greek historians recorded how dolphins were trained to sabotage enemy ships, their natural sonar guiding them to sever anchor lines or even deliver small explosives. The Byzantines allegedly used them to scout naval blockades, their sleek bodies slipping past patrols undetected. Even octopuses got in on the action. Their ability to squeeze through tiny gaps made them ideal for smuggling messages in and out of besieged coastal cities, hidden in hollowed-out shells. What made these animal operatives so effective was their invisibility to human suspicion. A bird in flight or a dolphin breaching the waves attracted no scrutiny, unlike a soldier caught behind enemy lines. Their instincts, honed over millennia, required no technology, just trust and training. And while modern spycraft has replaced feathers and fins with fiber optics, the principle remains the same. Sometimes the best intelligence tools aren't built in labs. They're born in nests, dens, and oceans, their loyalty as unshakable as their silence. So the next time you see a pigeon perched on a statue or a dolphin dancing in the surf, remember, their ancestors might have carried secrets that changed the course of history. Espionage didn't just shape history, it fueled the myths and legends that defined cultures. The Trojan horse stands as the ultimate symbol of deception, a masterclass in psychological warfare disguised as a gift. But look beyond the wooden facade, and you'll find a truth more fascinating than fiction. The Greeks didn't just rely on the horse. Homer's Odyssey reveals Odysseus himself slipped into Troy disguised as a beggar, scouting weaknesses and sowing discord long before the horse arrived. This wasn't just a tale of cunning, it was a blueprint for real-world espionage where patience and disguise trumped brute force. Halfway across the world, the Mahabharata wove espionage into the fabric of its epic battles. The Kurukshetra war turned on intelligence as much as arrows, with spies like Shalya infiltrating enemy camps as double agents. One passage describes how the Pandavas used a network of informants to track the Kauravas' movements, their reports as precise as any modern reconnaissance. Even divine intervention took a backseat to strategy. When the warrior Arjuna hesitated, it wasn't a god who persuaded him to fight, but the cold calculus of spies who'd revealed his enemies' vulnerabilities. But mythology's spies weren't always grand strategists. Consider the Norse god Loki, whose lies and disguises made him the ultimate trickster. His shape-shifting antics, stealing Freya's necklace as a fly or sabotaging the walls of Asgard as a mare, mirrored the tactics of real Viking spies who mastered the art of blending into enemy settlements. These stories weren't just entertainment, they were cautionary tales, warning rulers that trust could be as dangerous as any blade. What's striking is how these legends blurred the line between fiction and reality. The art of war cites spies who divine the enemy's plans, while the Bible's book of Joshua features Rahab, a prostitute in Jericho who hid Israelite scouts in exchange for salvation, a story that echoes real Bronze Age espionage networks. Even Aesop's fables, with their clever foxes and duplicitous crows, distilled spycraft into moral lessons. These myths endure because they tap into a universal truth. Deception is as old as humanity itself. From the whispering halls of Troy to the blood-soaked fields of Kurukshetra, they remind us that the pen and the lie were often mightier than the sword. And when you peel back the layers of these stories, you'll find something startlingly modern. The same tactics used in cyber warfare and disinformation campaigns today, proving that the art of the spy is timeless. The fall of Rome didn't just collapse an empire, it shattered the delicate web of intelligence that had held it together. With the Fremontarii disbanded and the speculators scattered, Europe plunged into an era where survival often meant looking no further than the walls of one's own castle. Feudal lords, preoccupied with local squabbles and subsistence, lacked the resources or the vision to maintain sprawling spy networks. Information became as fragmented as the kingdoms themselves, reduced to whispered rumors between traveling minstrels or the occasional intercepted letter. But this wasn't just a dark age for espionage, it was a transformation. In the Byzantine East, however, the flame of organized intelligence never fully flickered out. The Eastern Roman Empire, with its capital in Constantinople, preserved Rome's legacy of statecraft, refining it into something even more subtle. The Byzantines didn't just rely on spies, they weaponized diplomacy itself. Ambassadors doubled as intelligence officers, their lavish gifts and flowery speeches masking careful observations of military weaknesses and courtly rivalries. One Byzantine manual, the Strategikon, advised envoys to memorize everything from the width of city gates to the moods of rulers' wives, proving that even in decline, the art of observation thrived. Meanwhile, in the fractured kingdoms of the West, espionage took on a rawer, more personal form. Viking raiders, masters of psychological terror, used disinformation to amplify their reputation. A single exaggerated tale of their brutality, spread by survivors, could empty entire villages before their longships even appeared on the horizon. Saxon kings employed scopers poets who doubled as propagandists to sing of their victories real or invented in mead halls, shaping loyalties through verse. These weren't the meticulous systems of Rome or Persia, but they worked with the tools at hand, fear, folklore, and the human hunger for stories. Yet the true turning point came with the rise of the Islamic Caliphates. While Europe struggled through feudalism, Baghdad's Barid, a postal network inherited from the Persians, became the backbone of an intelligence empire. Couriers carried more than letters. They ferried coded reports on rebel movements, tax revenues, and even the moods of distant governors. The Abbasids didn't just revive ancient spycraft, they institutionalized it, creating a bureaucracy of secrecy that would later inspire both Venetian informants and the Tudor spy masters. By the time the Renaissance dawned, the seeds planted by ancient spies had taken root in unexpected ways. The Medici bankers of Florence kept private networks of informants to track debtors and political shifts, while the Catholic Church's far-reaching influence made monasteries ideal listening posts. What seemed like a decline was actually a dispersal, a quiet proof that once the world learns the power of secrets, it never truly forgets. The shadow games of Rome and Byzantium didn't vanish. They simply waited for new players to pick up the pieces. And when they did, espionage would return not as a tool of empires, but as the lifeblood of nations. From clay tablets to quantum encryption, the tools of espionage have evolved beyond recognition, yet the game itself remains unchanged. Consider how ancient Mesopotamian spies relied on memorized messages to avoid leaving physical evidence, a tactic mirrored today in the use of burner phones and self-destructing digital files. The medium shifts, but the principle endures. Deniability is everything. When a Roman speculator poisoned a rival's wine, he left no fingerprints, just as modern operatives might deploy malware that erases its own traces. The goal wasn't just to act, but to vanish without a trail. Human intelligence, or HUMINT, still forms the backbone of spycraft, proving that technology can't replace the art of reading people. Sun Tzu's 5 types of spies, from expendable pawns to deep cover sleepers, find their counterparts in today's intelligence agencies. A 21st century local spy might be a journalist embedded in a conflict zone, while a double agent could be a corporate insider feeding industrial secrets to foreign handlers. The tradecraft hasn't faded, it's adapted. Even the ancient practice of recruiting sources through blackmail or ideology persists, though now it's called asset cultivation, and might involve compromising social media activity rather than intercepted love letters. What's truly fascinating are the parallels in deception techniques. The Persian royal messengers who memorized dispatches to avoid interception were practicing the ancient equivalent of end-to-end encryption. Byzantine agents spreading false rumors about their own military defeats were running primitive influence campaigns, not unlike today's troll farms manipulating social media narratives. And when Mongol scouts used mirrors to relay signals across vast distances, they were essentially employing an early version of satellite communication, just with sunlight instead of radio waves. Yet for all our advances, modern spies face the same fundamental challenge as their ancient predecessors. Trust is fragile, and betrayal is eternal. The downfall of Rome's Fremontarii, corrupted by their own power, finds echoes in contemporary scandals where intelligence officers sell secrets or abuse surveillance systems. Technology amplifies reach, but it doesn't eliminate human flaws. Perhaps the most striking continuity lies in targets rather than tactics. Ancient spies stalked grain supplies and trade routes, the critical infrastructure of their time. Today's cyber operatives hack into energy grids and financial systems, proving that while the battlefield changes, the prizes stay constant. The silk merchant whispering about caravan routes would instantly recognize the value of a stolen algorithm controlling global shipping lanes. This enduring thread reveals a sobering truth. No firewall can patch human vulnerability. No satellite can replace a well-placed informant. The shadows where spies operate may be digital now, but the players, the watchers, the betrayers, the silent architects of history still walk the same tightrope between invisibility and power. And that's why studying ancient espionage isn't just about the past. It's a masterclass in the timeless art of seeing without being seen. History hides its most intriguing spies in plain sight. Figures whose names escaped textbooks but whose actions quietly redirected the course of civilizations. Take the case of Bel Ibni, a Babylonian merchant whose bustling trade routes doubled as an intelligence network. While selling linen and spices in the 6th century BCE, he noticed something unsettling: unusual movements of Median troops near the Tigris River. Disguising his report as a routine trade ledger using coded references to grain prices, he alerted King Nebuchadnezzar to an impending invasion. The king's swift counterattack saved Babylon, and Bel Ibni vanished back into the marketplace, his role erased from official chronicles. Then there's Philaenis of Samos, a Greek courtesan whose salon in Athens became a vortex of secrets. While powerful men debated politics in her chambers, she catalogued their drunken boasts and alliances, funneling information to the Theban general Epaminondas. Her most stunning coup came in 362 BCE when she uncovered a Spartan plot to sabotage Thebes' water supply. The details were whispered over shared wine, dismissed as pillow talk, until Thebes intercepted the saboteurs red-handed. Unlike Delilah, whose story was twisted into morality tales, Philaenis wielded influence without caricature, her legacy surviving only in fragmented scrolls. Far to the east, a Chinese concubine named Zai reshaped kingdoms through calculated seduction. Sent by the Yu ruler Gaojon to infiltrate the court of rival King Fuchai, she didn't just steal secrets, she weaponized distraction. Her beauty became a smokescreen, lulling Fuchai into complacency while Yu agents sabotaged his grain stores. By the time Fuchai realized her duplicity, his army was starving, and Yu's victory was assured. Zai's fate remains a mystery, but her tactics echo in modern honeypot operations, proving that some strategies transcend millennia. Even the Vikings had their shadow players. Sigurd the Silent, a 9th century Norse trader, earned his nickname by observing more than he spoke. His voyages across Europe's river systems weren't just for furs and amber, they mapped weaknesses in Frankish defenses. When he reported poorly guarded river routes to Viking warlords, the resulting raids destabilized Charlemagne's empire. Sigurd's brilliance lay in his cover. No one suspects a merchant who barely talks. What binds these figures isn't fame but impact. They operated where history's spotlight rarely reaches: market stalls, bedrooms, and riverbanks, turning ordinary roles into extraordinary weapons. Their stories remind us that espionage's real masters aren't always the ones writing the manuals. Sometimes they're the ones who leave no manual at all. The Artha Shastra, that ancient Indian treatise on statecraft, didn't just describe espionage, it defended it. Authored by the shrewd strategist Couriers, the text argued that deception wasn't just acceptable for rulers, it was a moral duty. A king who cannot protect his people has failed them, he wrote, framing spies as the unseen shields of the realm. This wasn't empty justification. In a world where neighboring kingdoms could vanish overnight, intelligence wasn't a dirty game, it was survival. Couriers even ranked spies above soldiers in importance, comparing them to the roots of a tree, invisible but the reason the branches thrive. But India wasn't alone in this pragmatic view. Half a world away, the Greek historian Thucydides documented how Athens and Sparta treated their spies not as outcasts, but as patriots. When a Spartan scout named Aristodemus returned from behind enemy lines with critical troop movements, he wasn't shunned, he was celebrated. The Greeks saw intelligence gathering as a craft, like sculpture or shipbuilding, requiring skill and nerve. Even Herodotus, often called the father of history, wove tales of spies into his narratives without moral judgment, treating them as natural as diplomats or generals. Yet honor in espionage had its limits. The Romans, for all their reliance on Fremontarii, still wrestled with the stain of deceit. Cicero famously lambasted spies as necessary evils, while Seneca lamented that Rome's victories sometimes smelled of more trickery than triumph. This tension echoes in a story from the reign of Emperor Tiberius. A senator discovered his closest friend was reporting his private conversations to the throne. Though the emperor praised the informant's loyalty, the Senate recoiled not at the spying itself, but at its target. Spying on enemies was duty, spying on friends broke an unspoken code. The Chinese took a strikingly modern approach to the ethics of espionage. Sun Tzu's Art of War didn't just justify deception, it systematized it. His famous maxim, "All warfare is based on deception," extended to spies whom he saw as surgeons rather than assassins. Their cuts were precise, sparing the innocent while removing threats. The Han Dynasty even had a term for ethical spies, righteous agents, who followed strict rules against harming civilians or spreading unnecessary lies. A surviving imperial edict forbade using spies to incite rebellion among an enemy's peasants, seeing it as dishonorable. What's fascinating is how these ancient debates mirror today's dilemmas. The Shastra's distinction between protecting the many and oppressing the few parallels modern arguments about mass surveillance. Rome's discomfort with domestic spying foreshadowed contemporary backlash against wiretapping citizens. And Sun Tzu's righteous agents sound remarkably like today's intelligence protocols that prohibit targeting hospitals or aid workers. Perhaps the most revealing perspective comes from the Aztecs, who viewed spying through a spiritual lens. Their Quimichtin, or mouse spies, were chosen not just for stealth but for purity of intent. Before missions, they underwent rituals to cleanse their motives, believing that deceit for personal gain cursed the soul, but deceit for the empire's survival was blessed by the gods. In the end, ancient ethics hinged on one question: were the spies' shadows protecting the fire or shadows swallowing the light? The answer, it seems, depended on who held the torch. Long before microchips and fiber optics, ancient spies relied on everyday objects transformed into ingenious tools of deception. Take the humble sandal, ordinary footwear to most, but to Roman agents, a perfect hiding spot. Some legionnaires wore soles with hollow compartments, just deep enough to conceal a tiny scroll or a dose of poison, and those thick, decorative belts favored by Persian nobles. They often doubled as covert storage, their intricate metalwork hiding compartments for coded messages or even slim daggers. The brilliance of these adaptations lay in their simplicity. A spy didn't need specialized gear, just the creativity to repurpose what no one would suspect. signaling methods were equally inventive. The Greeks didn't just use mirrors to flash sunlight, they polished their shields to send coded bursts across battlefields, a technique so effective that Alexander the Great's armies could coordinate attacks miles apart without a single shout. Meanwhile, in ancient China, bamboo tubes fitted with sliding panels became primitive message guns, allowing agents to shoot tiny scrolls over walls or into crowded marketplaces unnoticed. Even children's toys served a purpose. Historians believe the Mesopotamians used spinning tops with coded markings, their innocent appearance masking secret communiques passed between informants. But the true masterpiece of ancient spy tech might be the Greek water organ. Far from a musical instrument, this device was an early lie detector. Suspects would place their hands in basins while interrogators monitored water displacement caused by pulse fluctuations, a rudimentary polygraph that exploited the body's involuntary reactions. The Carthaginians took a different approach, training parrots to mimic coded phrases, turning the birds into living, squawking encryption machines. Perhaps most startling were the talking knots of the Inca. While quipu chords recorded numerical data, certain knots held deeper meanings when manipulated by trained hands. A messenger might casually adjust them during conversation, altering the message without uttering a suspicious word. It was a system so subtle that even today, scholars debate its full complexity. What unites these tools isn't just their cleverness, but their universality. From Rome to the Andes, spies understood that the best gadgets weren't the most complex, they were the ones that blended seamlessly into daily life. A merchant's scales, a scribe's inkpot, even a dancer's ankle bells could hold world-shaking secrets. And that's the enduring lesson. Innovation in espionage has never been about technology. It's about seeing the extraordinary potential in the ordinary. Ancient spy training wasn't some haphazard apprenticeship. It was a meticulous curriculum, as structured as modern intelligence academies. In China, aspiring agents didn't just learn to lie. They studied the philosophy of deception under masters who treated espionage like a martial art. The Sun Tzu's Art of War prescribed years of training in mimicry, cryptography, and even poetry, because the perfect cover wasn't just a disguise, but a fully inhabited identity. Recruits memorized dialects down to regional slang, practiced forging seals with uncanny precision, and rehearsed the subtle art of leaving false trails. One surviving manual describes trainees staging elaborate ruses in marketplaces, earning passing grades only if they could convincingly lose doctored scrolls that led rivals to fabricated battle plans. Rome took a different but equally rigorous approach. Fremontarii candidates weren't just soldiers, they were scholars of culture. Before infiltrating Germanic tribes or Parthian courts, they spent months immersed in the customs of their targets, mastering table manners, religious rituals, even superstitions. A single misstep, like using the wrong hand to eat or mispronouncing a local deity's name, could mean exposure and death. Historical fragments suggest some Roman agents trained as actors, perfecting the ability to cry on command or feign drunkenness to lure secrets from loose-lipped officials. The best weren't just spies, they were chameleons capable of shifting identities as effortlessly as changing tunics. But perhaps the most surprising training ground lay in the deserts of Arabia. Bedouin tribes, long before Islam's rise, honed scouts with brutal precision. Young recruits were sent into the empty quarter with nothing but a dagger and a waterskin, tasked with tracking unseen across dunes for weeks. Their final exam, stealing a rival clan's camel without leaving a footprint, a test of stealth so demanding that failures were said to vanish into the sands forever. What united these systems was their reverence for patience. In India's Shastra, trainees spent years as sannyasis, holy beggars, to cultivate the art of invisibility. Byzantine handlers reportedly made agents tend gardens for months, teaching them that intelligence, like crops, couldn't be rushed. This wasn't just tradecraft, it was a reshaping of human instinct, turning ordinary men and women into living weapons of perception. The next time you hear about modern spy schools like the Farm or Mossad's training camps, remember, their roots stretch back to these ancient classrooms where the sharpest minds learned to weaponize silence. While the spy networks of Rome and China dominate history books, the kingdoms of ancient Africa developed intelligence systems just as intricate and just as vital to their survival. Take the Empire of Kush, a powerhouse along the Nile that rivaled Egypt for centuries. Their spies didn't just lurk in palaces, they thrived in the chaos of trade caravans and desert outposts. Kushite operatives, often disguised as merchants or camel drivers, monitored the movement of gold and iron along the Sahara's shifting routes, but their real genius lay in adaptation. When the Assyrians invaded with unfamiliar siege tactics, Kushite scouts infiltrated enemy camps, learning their methods and weaknesses. Within months, Kush's armies had adjusted their defenses, turning the invaders' own strategies against them. This wasn't just reconnaissance, it was tactical evolution in real time. Further east, the Kingdom of Axum took espionage to the seas. As a maritime superpower controlling trade between Africa, Arabia, and India, Axum's spies posed as sailors and dockworkers in bustling ports like Adulai. They tracked shipments of ivory and frankincense, yes, but also the whispers of rival merchants plotting to undercut Axum's dominance. One ancient chronicle describes how Axumite agents uncovered a scheme by Yemeni traders to sabotage their ships, not through intercepted letters, but by noticing subtle changes in the way cargo was being loaded. The lesson: sometimes espionage isn't about stealing secrets. It's about reading the unspoken patterns of everyday life. What made African spycraft unique was its deep integration with cultural traditions. The Dogon people of Mali, for instance, used their famed astronomical knowledge as a cipher. Scouts would relay messages coded in celestial alignments, meaningless to outsiders but crystal clear to initiates. Meanwhile, the Zulu kingdom's Isinjuna military advisors trained as intelligence gatherers from childhood, learning to interpret bird calls and animal tracks as signals of approaching enemies. These methods weren't written in manuals, they were passed down through oral histories and rituals, making them nearly impossible for outsiders to decode. The real tragedy is how much of this legacy has been erased. Unlike Rome's Fremontarii or China's secret manuals, African spy networks left few written records, not because they were primitive, but because their secrecy was too effective. When Axum fell, its intelligence networks dissolved into the shadows. Kush's methods were absorbed by successor states, their origins blurred by time. But the fragments that survive reveal a truth often ignored. Espionage wasn't born in Europe or Asia. It was a global language spoken fluently wherever power needed protection. And in the sands of the Sahara or the harbors of the Red Sea, Africa's spies proved they could outmaneuver anyone, even history's forgetfulness. The shadowy techniques of ancient spies didn't vanish with crumbling empires, they evolved, weaving themselves into the DNA of modern intelligence agencies. Consider Venice's Council of Ten, the Renaissance's most feared secret police. When they needed to intercept messages between conspirators, they didn't invent new methods. They revived Roman dead drops, hiding letters behind loose bricks in the Doge's palace. Their infamous black gondolas gliding silently through midnight canals were direct descendants of Assyrian scouts slipping through enemy camps. Even their use of poisoned rings mirrored the gift diplomacy of Persian assassins. The council understood what ancient spies had proven centuries earlier. The best tools are often the simplest, and the quietest moves leave the deepest marks. Across Europe, monarchs built their spy networks on these timeless foundations. Queen Elizabeth's spymaster, Sir Francis Walsingham, didn't just admire Sun Tzu's 5 types of spies, he replicated them. His projectionists spread disinformation like Byzantine agents, while his crows, double agents, echoed the expendable spies of ancient China. When Mary, Queen of Scots, was caught plotting against Elizabeth, it wasn't through some technological marvel. Walsingham's team used a classic Babylonian trick, intercepting and altering her letters, just like clay tablets switched in Mesopotamian courts. The outcome: a headsman's axe proving that paper could be as lethal as any dagger. Even Napoleon, despite his battlefield genius, fell prey to tactics older than the pyramids. British intelligence under William Wickham revived the Persian royal messenger system, creating a relay of fast horsemen to outpace French couriers. Meanwhile, Spanish guerrillas fighting Napoleon's occupation used Inca-style quipu knots to coordinate attacks, their coded strings dangling innocently from market stalls. These weren't just coincidences, they were proof that espionage's golden rules transcend time. Modern agencies openly acknowledge this debt. The CIA's first director, Alan Dulles, kept a well-thumbed copy of the Shastra on his desk, praising its insights on turning enemy agents. Mossad's training manuals still teach the Bedouin art of desert tracking, while Russia's SVR employs swallows honeypot spies straight from Zayesh's playbook. Even cyber warfare follows ancient logic. Today's phishing scams are just digital versions of Persian merchants accidentally dropping forged scrolls. The real lesson here isn't just about history repeating itself, it's about human nature. Whether carved on cuneiform tablets or encrypted in fiber optic cables, secrets obey the same rules. Trust is fragile, curiosity is universal, and the best way to hide something is to make everyone overlook it. When a double agent today activates a burner phone, they're channeling the same instincts that made a Roman speculator slip poison into a wine cup. The tools glitter with modernity, but the hands holding them. They've been playing this game for millennia. Hollywood loves to paint ancient spies as near-mythical figures, master assassins scaling palace walls in black cloaks, or seductresses extracting secrets with a single glance. But strip away the glamour and you'll find something far more fascinating. Real spies were masters of the mundane. Their genius wasn't in flashy theatrics, but in the painstaking discipline of blending in. Consider the Roman Fremontarii, those so-called grain inspectors who spent years building unremarkable cover identities. Their reports weren't scribbled in dramatic midnight meetings, but compiled during boring tax audits and market surveys. The most valuable intelligence often came from counting sacks of wheat or noting which merchants overpaid bribes, details so ordinary they escaped notice. Another myth, the idea that ancient spies worked alone. In truth, they relied on networks as intricate as any modern agency. Take the Silk Road's merchant spies who operated in chains of trust stretching thousands of miles. A single piece of intelligence might pass through a dozen hands. A Sogdian trader in Samarkand, a Persian caravan guard, a Greek ship captain, each link carefully insulated from the next. No lone wolves here, survival depended on collective anonymity. Even the famed Hashishans, often depicted as solo assassins, coordinated attacks through a web of lookouts, messengers, and local sympathizers. Their deadliest weapon wasn't the dagger, but the patience to wait months for the perfect moment and forget about instant results. Ancient espionage was a slow burn. Chinese deep cover agents might spend decades rising through enemy courts, their loyalty never questioned until it was too late. A Babylonian merchant spy could invest years cultivating a rival scribe, trading small favors for bigger trust. Compare that to movie spies who crack codes in minutes or seduce targets overnight. The reality was more like gardening, planting seeds, tending relationships, and harvesting intelligence only when ripe. Perhaps the biggest misconception is that ancient spies were morally ambiguous rogues. Many cultures saw intelligence work as honorable, even sacred. The Aztec Quimichtin underwent spiritual cleansings before missions, believing their deceit served divine will. Cortelia's Shastra framed spies as protectors of stability, their lies preventing wars rather than starting them. This wasn't shadowy villainy, it was statecraft polished to a fine edge. So why does pop culture get it so wrong? Because the truth, while astonishing, lacks Hollywood's shortcuts. Real spycraft isn't about glamorous danger, it's about the quiet calculus of human behavior. The next time you watch a spy flick, remember, history's greatest operatives didn't need gadgets or good looks. They needed the one thing no screenplay can easily dramatize: the discipline to be utterly, brilliantly ordinary. Even the most skilled spies of antiquity faced a truth as old as time. Luck could make or break a mission in the blink of an eye. Take the infamous case of the Athenian spy during the Peloponnesian War, who meticulously planned to infiltrate a Spartan camp by posing as a grain merchant. His forged documents were flawless, his accent impeccable, until a sudden rainstorm washed away the invisible ink on his supply manifest, exposing the ruse. One unpredictable downpour and years of preparation unraveled. Stories like these remind us that for all their cunning, ancient operatives were at the mercy of chance, weather, and the whims of human nature, just like anyone else. Then there were the double crosses no training could predict. A Babylonian agent named Nabu Ahidin spent months gaining the trust of an Elamite prince, only to discover too late that his own handler had sold him out. The cuneiform tablets detailing his fate captured, tortured, and ultimately spared when a rival faction staged a coup read like a cautionary tale. Even Rome's feared Fremontarii weren't immune. One operative, embedded for years in a Germanic tribe, saw his cover blown when a childhood acquaintance recognized him at a festival. The best disguises couldn't account for every face from the past. Sometimes luck intervened in ways that reshaped history. When a Carthaginian spy ship ran aground near Syracuse in 215 BC, Roman soldiers found not just secret maps, but an entire battle plan etched on silver plates. The accidental discovery led to Rome's crushing victory at Metaurus, turning the tide of the Second Punic War. Centuries later, a Byzantine courier's wrong turn in Constantinople's labyrinthine streets inadvertently exposed a Persian assassination plot because he stumbled upon the conspirators rehearsing in an abandoned cistern. What makes these stories so compelling isn't just the chaos they reveal, but how spies adapted. The Shastra advised agents to always have an exit tale, a pre-prepared story for when plans failed. Chinese operatives carried poisoned jade rings not just for enemies, but as a merciful escape if luck turned against them. And the Vikings, their sagas celebrate spies who leaned into misfortune, like the agent who, caught stealing a rival chief's battle plans, talked his way into joining their war band instead. These glimpses of imperfection shatter the myth of the infallible ancient spy. They show us operatives who sweated, improvised, and sometimes barely escaped with their lives, not because they lacked skill, but because espionage has always been a dance between preparation and chaos. In the end, the greatest weapon in any spy's arsenal wasn't just training or tools, but the resilience to turn bad luck into a new opportunity. And that's a lesson as valuable today as it was 3,000 years ago. History rarely records the failures of spies, only their victories. Yet when empires crumbled, the cracks often began with intelligence breakdowns. Rome's decline, for instance, wasn't just about barbarian invasions or economic collapse. It was a slow unraveling of the very spy networks that had sustained it. By the 3rd century, the Fremontarii, once the empire's invisible glue, had become so feared for their corruption that emperors like Diocletian disbanded them entirely. The replacement, the agents in rebus, lacked their predecessors' deep-rooted tradecraft. Without reliable eyes in distant provinces, Rome missed critical warnings, Germanic tribes massing beyond the Rhine, Persian armies maneuvering in the east. The empire didn't just fall to swords, it bled out from 1,000 unseen cuts, misread threats, ignored whispers, and the fatal assumption that power could survive without vigilance. Half a world away, China's Han Dynasty faced a mirror image of this collapse. Their collapse wasn't just about peasant revolts or court intrigue, it was a failure to adapt their legendary spy networks. The Han had perfected the 5 types of agents outlined by Sun Tzu, but over centuries the system grew rigid. Local spies, once recruited from nomadic tribes along the Silk Road, were replaced by bureaucratic appointees with no feel for the terrain. When the Xiongnu nomads began raiding with new tactics, Han intelligence was still fixated on old patterns. By the time the dynasty realized its scouts were feeding it outdated information, rebel armies were already at the gates of Luoyang. The lesson: even the most sophisticated spycraft rots without renewal. But the most striking case might be Byzantium. For centuries, Constantinople's intelligence machine was unmatched until it prioritized politics over pragmatism. In the 11th century, Emperor Romanos Roman IV Diogenes dismissed reports of Seljuk Turk movements as exaggerated, believing his border agents were fabricating threats to secure more funding. His skepticism cost him dearly at the Battle of Manzikert, where captured Byzantine scouts later confessed they'd been ignored. The empire never fully recovered. This wasn't just a military defeat, it was an institutional failure to distinguish between inconvenient truths and disloyalty. What unites these collapses isn't just incompetence, but complacency. The Mongols under Genghis Khan succeeded where others failed precisely because they treated intelligence as fluid. Their scouts, often former enemies turned loyal informants, were rewarded for challenging assumptions, not confirming them. When a report seemed too perfect, commanders assumed deception and demanded verification. This culture of disciplined skepticism kept their empire expanding long after others had ossified. The parallels to modern intelligence are uncomfortably clear. From the CIA's pre-9/11 lapses to the Soviet KGB's failure to predict the USSR's own collapse, history's warning echoes. Empires don't fall when spies are overworked. They fall when spies are overlooked, when leaders confuse loyalty with blind obedience, or when the hunger for truth is replaced by the comfort of certainty. The real takeaway, the difference between dominance and downfall, often lies not in the secrets you steal, but in the truth you choose to hear. The lost art of ancient espionage isn't just a relic of the past, it's a mirror reflecting timeless truths about power, secrecy, and the extraordinary lengths humans will go to protect what matters. Those early spies, from the grain inspectors of Rome to the Silk Road merchants of China, didn't just gather secrets, they rewrote the rules of influence, proving that a well-placed whisper could topple empires faster than any army. What's striking isn't just their ingenuity, but how familiar their struggles feel. The Fremontarii wrestling with corruption, the Han Dynasty's scouts failing to adapt, these weren't just ancient missteps. They were early warnings about the delicate balance between trust and control, between innovation and complacency. Yet the real legacy of these shadow operatives isn't in their tactics, but in their humanity. They remind us that beneath the cloak and dagger mystique, espionage has always been a deeply human endeavor. A scribe's shaky hand encoding a message, a merchant's nervous laugh masking a lie, a concubine's calculated sigh. These were moments of tension, courage, and sometimes desperation. The tools have evolved, but the game hasn't. Today's cyber operatives and deep cover agents still face the same fundamental challenge, outthinking an adversary while staying invisible. So what can we learn from these ancient masters? That information is only as powerful as the hands that wield it. That the best spies aren't the ones with the fanciest gadgets, but the ones who understand people, their fears, their loyalties, their blind spots. And perhaps most importantly, that history's quietest players often leave the loudest echoes. The next time you hear about a modern intelligence breakthrough, remember, somewhere in the shadows, a Roman speculator or a Silk Road trader is nodding in recognition. If this journey into the hidden corners of history has sparked your curiosity, let's keep the conversation going. Drop a comment below with your favorite ancient spy story or a modern mystery you'd love to see unraveled. And for more deep dives into the untold stories that shaped our world, don't forget to subscribe. After all, the past is full of secrets waiting for the right moment to surface. Who knows what other forgotten strategies, whispered alliances, or unsung heroes we might uncover next? The shadows still have plenty to teach us if we're willing